Of all the continents on Earth, Africa is the one with the most species, the most biodiversity, the most ecological complexity, the most ancient ecosystems. It is also the hottest, the most difficult to survive in without preparation, and the continent that has produced more apex predators per square kilometer than anywhere else on the planet. And it is the only place where human beings evolved. The question is not simply interesting, it is fundamental. Because if Africa had been slightly different, if the pressures had been slightly less extreme, if the food had been slightly easier to find, or if the competition had been slightly less fierce, there is a strong scientific argument that what we call human intelligence might never have appeared at all. Humans did not evolve in Africa despite it being dangerous. They evolved in Africa because of it. Start with what existed before humans. Around 6 to 8 million years ago, the last common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees was already living in Africa. This is not an accident. The great apes, chimpanzees, gorillas, bonobos, orangutans all share a common African ancestry, and most still live in Africa today. The primate lineage from which humans descended was already established on this continent before anything recognizable as a human being existed. Africa had a head start, not because Africa was especially welcoming to primates, but because it had been the testing ground for primate evolution for tens of millions of years. When the climate began shifting and new selection pressures emerged, the raw material and intelligent, social, bipedally capable ape was already present and already under enormous evolutionary pressure to change. The key driver of what happened next was the African Rift Valley. Around 5 to 10 million years ago, the tectonic activity that created the East African Rift System began reshaping the landscape of Eastern Africa in a way that would change the history of life on Earth. Before the rift, much of East Africa was covered by dense rainforest. After it, the landscape opened up. The forest fragmented. Grasslands emerged. What had been a continuous canopy became a patchwork of forest patches separated by open savanna. The apes living in this changing environment faced a stark choice: stay in the shrinking forest patches and compete intensely for existing resources, or venture out into the open grasslands where food was spread across enormous distances and predators were waiting. The lineage that became human went out into the grasslands, and the grassland changed everything. Moving on all fours through tall grass is slow, energetically expensive, and provides almost no visibility. Standing upright on 2 feet is faster across open terrain, frees the hands for carrying food, and most critically raises the eyes above the grass line, allowing a creature to scan for predators and prey across distances that a knuckle-walking ape simply cannot monitor. Walking upright was not a comfortable or efficient solution. If you have ever hiked any serious distance, you know that bipedalism is physically demanding. But in open African grassland, the ability to stand, scan, carry, and cover distance efficiently provided exactly the kind of adaptive advantage that natural selection acts on ruthlessly. Bipedalism did not appear because some ape decided to walk upright. It appeared because the ones who could do it marginally better than the others were surviving marginally better, and across hundreds of thousands of generations, marginally better compounds into something unrecognizable. The same grassland environment that drove upright walking also drove the expansion of the brain. Surviving in the African savanna required a set of cognitive demands that rainforest life simply did not impose at the same intensity. Tracking animals across long distances and unpredictable terrain. Understanding seasonal patterns in plant availability across a landscape that changed constantly with rainfall. Cooperating with group members whose trust and reciprocal behavior could mean the difference between finding food and going without it. Predicting the behavior of multiple large and dangerous species simultaneously. Each of these demands placed selection pressure on a brain that could model the world more accurately, plan further into the future, and communicate more precisely with other members of the group. The grassland was not just a place humans lived, it was an intelligence engine that ran continuously for millions of years. Africa also provided the right scale of adversity. It was not so extreme that no creature could survive. It was extreme enough that only creatures with specific advantages thrived. The diversity of large predators in the African ecosystem meant that early hominins were under continuous predation pressure. Being slow, individually weak, and relatively small compared to lions and leopards meant that social cooperation was not optional. A single early human alone in the African savanna was almost certainly prey. A coordinated group that could communicate, share information about threats, and act collectively against predators had a dramatically better survival probability. Social intelligence, the ability to read other individuals, predict their behavior, form alliances, and maintain trust, became as critical as physical capability. And social intelligence is the foundation of everything that followed. The reason Africa and not Asia, not Europe, not South America, comes down to a convergence of factors that existed nowhere else at the right time. The pre-existing primate lineage, the tectonic reshaping that created open grasslands from dense forest, the predation pressure that made cooperation essential, the environmental unpredictability that made intelligence valuable. Remove any single element from that combination and the outcome changes. There are intelligent animals on every continent. There are social animals on every continent. There are bipedal animals on several continents. But the specific combination of factors that drove all of these traits to appear simultaneously and reinforce each other in the same lineage that happened in Africa, once across millions of years of accumulated pressure. And it produced something that had never existed before and has never appeared anywhere else since. The continent that is most often described as harsh, dangerous, and difficult to survive is the continent that made survival difficult enough to require a new kind of creature. And then it produced one.